Welcome to this training video on using AssetOptics for Salesforce Lighting Experience. This is lesson 5 on MRO purchasing. Today we'll start with a brief overview of the purchase order, including the two different record types. We'll have a look at the different PO line types, which include those for purchasing stock item inventory and other services. We'll learn how to create a purchase order or a purchase requisition. And we'll also review, as we did in lesson 4, how to replenish stock items based on reorder points. And lastly, we'll go over the receiving process. We'll start by looking at an existing purchase order. This way we can review some of the important fields and components before we create our own. As you can see here, normally when you create a PO or PR, you'll provide a description. Purchase orders are vendor specific, and here the vendor is a lookup to Salesforce accounts. The owner, of course, is the user record. You can optionally specify a buyer on a purchase order. In this case, this is actually the default buyer that is specified on our storeroom. In addition to vendor, all purchase orders are storeroom specific. The next field section, shipping and billing, includes the addresses that are specified on the storeroom record. And perhaps most importantly, the actual purchase order lines, the things that we're ordering from the vendor. I'll pop this up on the quick links pane just to kind of give you a brief look, and we'll have a look at this again in a moment. Here we see the PO lines, the quantities, the part numbers, etc. As you can see on this PO, the record type is order. The AssetOptics purchase order object has two different record types, order and requisition. Some user profiles in your org may not be assigned the record type order, in which case if they create a purchase requisition, it has to be submitted for an approval, after which point it will be converted to an order. The .name field, this auto number up here, this will remain the same throughout the life cycle of the purchase order as it goes through the approval process. Certain user profiles can create either requisitions or orders at their discretion. This is really up to your org and your decision as a business. To create a new purchase requisition or purchase order, a user can click the New Action button in the Purchase Orders tab, or they can click the down caret on the Purchase Orders tab and click New Purchase Order. As you'll see here, I'm logged in as a user profile which does not have access to the purchase order record type. Therefore, the dialog box that appears immediately takes me to a new purchase requisition, in which case I would begin by entering a description. The user would then choose an account. A storeroom ID is mandatory. I'll say Plant 1. And the optional buyer field can be specified, as well as the required date and any comments. At this point, the user would begin to add new stock lines and new service lines. But I'm going to log out as this user and do this process one more time with a more conventional user profile. If your user profile allows you to create either record type, when you invoke the new purchase order, you will see here the dialog to choose which you want. We'll go with order this time. Again, as before, we'll select a vendor and put a description on our purchase order. We can optionally specify a required date. Here you'll notice the shipping and billing address field section appears as it did not on the requisition order type. This information, along with the buyer, if applicable, will be inherited from the storeroom record. We can see that now that shipping and billing address, as well as terms, has been pre-populated from the storeroom record. It's at this point you can begin adding your purchase order lines. As alluded to earlier, there are two types of purchase order lines, stock lines and service lines. The difference is that stock lines are stock items. You will recall from lesson 4 on MRO inventory management that a stock item represents actual physical inventory in a specific storeroom. These are parts that you manage. They have reorder points, they have preferred vendor case packs, and so on. Ordering a new stock item is as simple as pressing this button, New Stock Line. You'll be presented with this dialog. You can, optionally choose how many lines you wish to display. You can select your stock items with the radio button here. If there is an existing vendor case pack associated with this storeroom and vendor combination, it will be in this section. There can be more than one, of course. You can choose that vendor case pack, enter an order quantity, let's say 5 of these, and add to purchase order. If you wanted to order a stock item for which there is no vendor case pack, let's see if we can find an example of that. The next item in this list does have a vendor case pack. This one does not, so it by default presents you with these fields which you are to fill out, and you will create a new vendor case pack on the fly, if you will. Now, if we had selected the previous line for the shaft and gear assembly, and we decided we did not want to order whatever this case pack was, we could still create a new vendor case pack on the fly here. We could say we're going to order 3 of these at a purchase price of $25. We'll simply enter the vendor part number here. Excuse me. You can optionally put a purchase description in here, but if you do not, it will automatically create one for you based on the part number, the purchase pack quantity, and so forth. The pack quantity here represents the number of the individual items in the pack. We'll stick with eaches here for simplicity. At this point, we have 2 purchase order lines. We see them summarized here, and you'll also notice that the record type for this PO line, each of these 2 PO lines, is stock, meaning this is a stock line. If we wanted to order items other than stock item inventory, we would use the service line. A service line can be a catch-all for any miscellaneous expense, any charge other than a stock item, including rentals, including miscellaneous charges, or one-off purchases. So say I want to buy some Kim wipes. So here again, we look at our 3 purchase order lines. You'll see there is no stock item number, obviously, for line number 3 because this does not exist in our inventory. There is no item master and there's no stock item record associated with this box of Kim wipes. You'll likewise see the record type for this PO line says service. Let's add one more stock line just for fun. Here we have an existing vendor case pack. We're going to add that to the purchase order. Now, when we were creating the record initially, of course, we had to choose the storeroom because that gives us our stock items to choose from. We could have waited to specify the vendor, but by choosing the vendor from the outset, what that does is it makes available to us all the vendor case packs. If we're satisfied with the purchase order, we can simply update the status of the PO by clicking this action button here and releasing it to the vendor. Another easy way to create a purchase requisition is from a stock item list view. You can simply select the items you wish to order and click the Generate PO button. Of course, you'd probably want to create your own custom list view in order to filter down on a smaller number of records, or you could utilize one of the pre-built list views, such as items to reorder purchase requisition. You may recall from the previous lesson that stock item records have reorder points specified on them. In this example, the reorder point is 5 for this item, yet there are 0 available. Therefore, based on the EOQ, we are told to order 5 more. Again, from this list view, we see that we currently have 5 stock items which have fallen below their reorder point. If I wanted to reorder these, I could select them all, or I could pick which ones I want. In this case, I'll pick the first 3. When I click this Generate PO button, it is going to create one or more purchase requisitions based on the number of storeroom and vendor permutations there are. So I can see already that there are 2 different storerooms here and 2 different vendors. So we're going to end up with 3 purchase requisitions. Clicking this button invokes this flow, and eventually we'll get a confirmation. Now, if we want to quickly find those purchase requisitions, we'd probably choose a list view like all purchase requisitions, or requisitions created today is probably better. Just as I thought, there are 3 purchase requisitions here. Now, as you can see, the descriptions are the same as the ID, as the .name field. We didn't have an opportunity to individually describe those. We could optionally go in here and change the description. We could also edit the purchase order lines. The order quantity by default was what was calculated based on our reorder point, but we can change that. Likewise, we can add additional lines to this purchase requisition. Since the vendor here is known, we may choose to add some additional things from this same vendor. Here, there's a case pack for this item. I'm going to order one of these. And the same goes for service lines. If we wanted to add a service line, we would just invoke that action. Again, when we're satisfied with this, we will now submit for approval. As you can see, the record type here is requisition. So we're going to submit this for an approval, add any comments, and it's gone. If for whatever reason you haven't watched video lesson number 4 on inventory management, I would encourage you to do so you can learn a little bit better how these fields are calculated on the stock item record, the quantity to reorder, and so on. Eventually, the items that you order will be delivered or picked up, at which point you can begin the receiving process. So identify the appropriate purchase order. In this case, it'll be PO 13 for our example. We'll use a related list to review the PO lines. Here we see 3 stock lines and 2 service lines. Assuming we've actually received one of the parts, identify the purchase order line. Let's say in this case it's line 16. And in the right-hand corner, you'll see this action that says New Receipt. Clicking that button, it'll give us the option to edit the transaction quantity. It will default to the open quantity. We'll accept it in this case. The default bin location will appear. If there's more than one bin location, you can choose it. And we'll hit Receive. We'll do that a second time. I'll navigate back through the purchase order the long way into the related list. Now you'll see here that line 2 has been fully received. We see the total received and the open quantity is now 0. We'll do a partial receipt on line 1. So I'm going to click New Receipt, and this time the transaction quantity defaults to 5, which is the open quantity. But I'm going to say I'm only receiving 2. The rest are back ordered. If you look closely at the details of this purchase order line, you will see here that the total received quantity is updated, the open quantity as well, the dollar figure associated with the total received amount, the open amount, and so on. A lot of detail here. And again, if you'll recall from the previous lesson on inventory management, inventory transactions will be recorded for these actions. We had an order transaction of 5, but we've only received 2. If we receive additional inventory transactions of a type receipt will take place. If we wanted to go and navigate to the actual stock item, we'd likewise see the inventory transactions associated here. And if we went to the Open Purchase Orders tabs, we would see that Purchase Order 13, this is the one we're working on, is now in progress. Once we began the receiving process on this purchase order, the status was automatically updated from released to in progress. There are validation rules which control the transitions between these statuses. So for example, you can go from approved to released, released to in progress, and in progress to completed, but you can't go from completed to approved or waiting approval to released. I mean, there's certain steps that have to be taken in order to update these statuses. Returning to our PO lines, one thing worth mentioning is that you can update the order quantity on a purchase order line after the purchase order has been released. So let's go back to PO line 1, for example. We received 2 of these, and there are 3 that remain open. We entered the comment that they were back ordered, and that was just kind of as an example. As you can see here, the order quantity field is actually editable. So we're going to put 2 since we received 2 and update the order quantity. Now the open amount is $0 and the open quantity ordered is 0. The reason you might want to do that is, for example, if those back ordered items are going to be so far out in advance that you just decide to cancel it, or perhaps you decided you didn't need that many, or you might actually have called the vendor after the order had been placed and you said you wanted to increase the quantity ordered. So with most profiles, you have the ability to change the order quantity even once the purchase order has been released and or is in progress. Another important thing to note is that even though we had service lines on this purchase order as well, and here we see 2 of them, you still need to do the receiving process for service lines. Even though there won't be inventory transactions associated with these receipts because, well, they're not stock inventory items, you still need to acknowledge that you've received these. By acknowledging receipt of the service lines in addition to the stock item lines, then you will be able to update the status automatically of the purchase order to completed as appropriate. So we'll kind of go through and receive the final items on here. Now that I've received all PO lines, both service lines and stock lines, the PO status has gone to completed. In the just completed example, we received 3 PO stock lines on a purchase order, all of which were bulk stock inventory. That is, stock items that are not serialized, stock items that are fungible, things like gloves, fasteners, motor oil. One is as good as the other. In this example, let's receive to a purchase order some serialized stock items. In this case, on PO 25, we have just 1 purchase order line, but it is for some general purpose AC motors. If we looked at this stock item record, we would see that it is serialized at inventory receipt. And what that means is at the receiving point, we have to specify what the serial number of the individual item is. We can also specify a serialization control point at inventory issue. But this one is at inventory receipt. So let's navigate to the open purchase orders, and here we're on PO 25. We can go directly to the PO line. So receiving here is a lot like the previous example, except we will be asked to enter an asset tag or a serial number. So you see that the transaction quantity here is going to be 2, and we will edit the asset tag serial number. And now the total received quantity on the purchase order line is 2, and there are none open. Now, one of the things that's unique about serialized inventory is that we treat it as both equipment and as a stock item. So when we enter those serial numbers, if we go up here to this related list, we'll see that there are actually 2 equipment/asset records that bear the description general purpose AC motor. So if we went to our equipment/assets tab here, we'd actually see those listed as assets. We can perform maintenance on them. We can, do the normal stuff that you would for an equipment record. If we go to stock items, we will also see them as inventory. We have now an on-hand quantity of 3. There was an inventory transaction where we just received 2, and there was previously 1. So that's what receiving on a purchase order looks like with serialized inventory. So to recap, we looked at the basic structure of a purchase order and noted the fact that they are vendor and storeroom specific. We looked at the 2 record types, requisition and order, and noted that the typical status flow on a purchase requisition is from request to waiting approval to approved, released, in progress, and completed. We also learned a little bit about the 2 different PO line types, stock and service, the former being used to order stock items and the latter for all other charges to a PO. We created a couple of purchase requisitions, and we saw a couple of different ways to do that, including from a list view. And we revisited stock item replenishment, which was covered in Lesson 4 on MRO inventory management. And finally, we looked at a couple of examples of how to receive PO lines, both stock lines and service lines. And in the case of stock lines, we also looked at how to receive serialized inventory. So with that, this concludes Lesson 5 on MRO purchasing. If you have any further questions for us, you can reach us at our email address or at our website. Thank you.